Gentlemen, the enemy is here. We strike at dawn. Understood, sir. Flank secured. Artillery will be ready. Good. No delays. The enemy is advancing from the east. We move now to flank them. Hold the line here at all costs.
In every army, the rear area is sacred. It's where supply depots operate without fear of attack, where headquarters plan without posting guards, where soldiers sleep, trucks refuel, and communications centers function in relative safety. The rear exists 20, 30, sometimes 50 miles behind the front line. It's not just geography. It's a psychological sanctuary that lets armies function. March 1945. George Patton's Third Army advances so fast that the rear area ceases to exist. German supply columns are ambushed in towns they believed were secure. Command posts are overrun while issuing orders. Hospital trains are captured. Soldiers eating breakfast find American tanks outside their windows. The chaos isn't accidental, it's the intended result of moving faster than the enemy's understanding of where the battle is. When the rear disappears, armies don't just retreat.
Attention all units, advance to the forward position immediately. Soldiers, the enemy is advancing. We move now.
Yes, sir.
Gear up. Stay sharp. Let's move.
They disintegrate. Military doctrine divides battle space into zones. The front line where combat occurs, the
forward area where reserves and immediate support operate, and the rear area where the machinery of war functions without constant threat. This division is fundamental to how armies operate. It allows commanders to focus combat units on fighting, while support units handle logistics, medical care, and administration. The rear is where reinforcements stage before moving forward, where the wounded are evacuated, where ammunition is stored, food is prepared, and orders are transmitted. It exists because armies need space where soldiers can function without helmets, where truck drivers don't scan for threats, where clerks can file reports without manning machine guns. The German army in March 1945 still maintains this structure despite retreating. As units fall back across Germany, they establish temporary rear areas in towns and villages behind the fighting. These locations are chosen based on distance from the front and availability of infrastructure. A town 15 miles behind the
current line becomes a battalion headquarters. A rail junction 20 miles back becomes a supply depot. A village 25 miles deep serves as a field hospital. German military police establish checkpoints, post signs, organize traffic flow. The rear area might be temporary and hastily organized, but it follows the same principles that have governed military operations for centuries. This structure depends entirely on knowing where the front line is and how fast it is. German intelligence tracks American advance rates carefully. Third Army has been pushing east at roughly 10 to 15 miles per day, which is fast by historical standards, but predictable. German staff officers calculate that a rear area established 25 miles behind the current front has at least 36 hours before it might be threatened, probably longer. That assumption is built into every decision: where to position supply dumps, how many guards to post, whether headquarters staff need to be armed and alert or can focus on administrative work. Patton's operational concept deliberately targets this assumption. He understands that the distinction between front and rear is not geographical but temporal. The rear exists because it takes time for combat forces to advance. If you can compress that time, make advances that are not gradual but explosive, you can place combat forces in areas the enemy still considers safe. The psychological and practical effects are devastating. Rear area units are not trained or equipped for sudden combat. A supply company has clerks and truck drivers, not infantrymen. A headquarters company has radio operators and staff officers, not assault troops. When these units are attacked, where they believed they were secure, they don't transition to combat effectively. They panic, scatter, or surrender. The mechanism Patton uses to collapse the rear is the armored spearhead operating at maximum sustainable speed. Third Army doesn't advance on a uniform
front. It punches through with concentrated armor at specific points, then exploits those breakthroughs with columns that drive deep before fanning out. These columns don't stop to secure territory or reduce resistance. They bypass strong points, ignore minor opposition, and race toward objectives 15, 20, 30 miles beyond where the Germans believe the front line is. Behind them, the infantry consolidates. But the armor doesn't wait. It keeps moving, keeps accelerating, keeps appearing in places it has no business being. On March 23, 1945, elements of the 4th Armored Division cross the Rhine and begin a rapid advance eastward. By nightfall, lead units are 18 miles beyond the river. German commanders receiving these reports calculate that the American front line has moved 18 miles. They adjust their rear areas accordingly, pulling back units that were in the forward zone, establishing new logistics points 25 miles beyond the American positions. What
they don't realize is that the 18-mile figure represents where the bulk of American forces. The spearheads are already 30 miles beyond the Rhine, and they're not stopping. They're accelerating. March 24th, 1945. A German supply column is moving through the town of Vechtersbach, 40 miles east of the Rhine. The convoy consists of 12 trucks carrying ammunition, rations, and medical supplies. It's midday. The weather is clear. The drivers are relaxed, some smoking, some talking. There's no combat alert, no scouts ahead, no weapons manned. Why would there be? The nearest American forces, according to the last situation report, are over 20 miles away. The convoy is deep in the rear area. It's safe. At 1:15 p.m., 3 American Sherman tanks appear at the eastern edge of town. The German drivers see them and freeze, unable to process what they're. American tanks cannot be here. The front is 20 miles west. These must be captured tanks being operated by
German forces. But then the tanks open fire. The lead truck in the convoy explodes. The second truck swerves and crashes. German soldiers bail out of the vehicles and run, leaving weapons and supplies behind. Within 5 minutes, the convoy is destroyed, 12 trucks burning, their cargo lost, and the survivors scattered into the countryside. The American tanks don't pursue. They move on to the next objective. The entire engagement lasts less than 10 minutes. Similar scenes are playing out across a 100-mile front. A German field hospital in Gelnhausen, established the previous day as a safe location for wounded soldiers, is overrun by American infantry at 3 p.m. The medical staff had posted no guards, dug no defensive positions. They're treating patients when American soldiers walk into the building. The hospital surrenders without resistance. Over 200 wounded German soldiers become prisoners, along with the medical staff, and not because they were defeated
in combat, but because they were in a location they believed was secure. A Corps headquarters in Schluchtern receives its first indication that something is wrong when staff officers hear gunfire in the town. American tanks have entered from the east, not the west. The direction is significant. If Americans were approaching from the west, from the front, there would have been warning, contact reports from forward units, time to evacuate or prepare for defense. But Americans approaching from the east means they have somehow gotten behind the headquarters, which should be impossible. The Corps commander orders immediate evacuation. Staff officers grab what documents they can, abandon their radios and maps, and flee in whatever vehicles are available. The headquarters is captured 20 minutes later, yielding intelligence documents that Third Army will use to plan the next phase of operations. The pattern repeats throughout the day. Rear area units, supply companies, engineer,
battalions, artillery batteries moving into position, military police detachments encounter American forces in locations where American forces should not exist. The initial reaction is always disbelief, then confusion, then panic. These units are not cowards. Many are experienced soldiers who have fought on multiple fronts, but they're psychologically unprepared for combat in the rear area. The rear is where you don't have to be constantly alert, where you can relax fractionally, where the immediate threat of death recedes. When that sanctuary is violated, the psychological shock is profound. German command posts start receiving fragmentary reports. American tanks in Vechtersbach, American infantry in Gelnhausen, American forces in Schluchtern. Staff officers plot these locations on maps and realize with growing horror that American spearheads have penetrated 30 to 40 miles beyond where the front line was supposed to be. Orders are issued to rear area units. Establish defensive positions, prepare for attack, move to alternate locations. But the orders arrive too late or not at all. Communications are breaking down. Telephone lines run through areas now occupied by American forces. Radio networks are overwhelmed with traffic. Motorcycle couriers are being captured or ambushed. The rear area, which depends on reliable communications to function, is losing its ability to receive orders or report its status. By evening of March 24th, German forces in central Germany are operating in a state of profound uncertainty. Nobody knows where the Americans are. Reports are contradictory. One unit reports Americans to the west, another reports Americans to the east. A third reports Americans to the north. Staff officers trying to construct a coherent picture of the battlefield find it impossible. The front line, which should be a definable position, has become a vague zone of American penetration that seems to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, and
critically, there's no rear area anymore. Every location is potentially threatened. Every road might have American armor on it. Every town might be the next to be overrun. March 25th begins with German Army headquarters attempting to restore order to chaos. Senior commanders issue directives to reestablish the front line, to organize coherent defensive positions, to regain control of the battle. But these directives depend on subordinate units receiving orders, understanding their situation, and executing complex maneuvers. None of those conditions. The breakdown is not tactical, it's systemic. A German division commander receives orders to withdraw to a new defensive line along a river 20 miles east of his current position. The orders are clear, detailed, and militarily sound, but executing them requires coordinating the movement of over 10,000 soldiers, hundreds of vehicles, and all the division's equipment. That coordination depends on communications. The
division's radio network is functioning, but only sporadically. Atmospheric conditions are poor, and American jamming is disrupting frequencies. The telephone network is worse. Cables run through territory now contested or controlled by American forces. Multiple line breaks have been reported. Repairs are impossible because repair crews can't reach the damaged sections without being captured. The division commander does what he can. He sends motorcycle couriers to his regiments with written orders. 3 couriers depart at dawn. 2 are captured by American patrols within an hour. The third reaches his destination only to find the regiment has already displaced and nobody knows where they've moved. The commander tries radio contact. He reaches one regiment, which confirms receipt of orders and begins withdrawing. The other 2 regiments don't respond. Are they destroyed? Captured? Out of radio range? The commander doesn't know. He makes a decision. Withdraw with the forces he can.
Contact and hope the others receive orders and follow. This scene repeats at every level of command. Battalion commanders can't reach their companies. Company commanders have lost contact with platoons. The hierarchical structure that allows armies to function as coordinated entities is fragmented. Units are making independent decisions based on incomplete information. Some withdraw. Some hold position. Some attempt to retreat, only to discover their planned routes are already cut by American forces. The result is not a coordinated withdrawal, but a chaotic, uncoordinated displacement where units move in different directions at different times, losing cohesion and mutual support. Patton's forces are deliberately targeting German command and communications infrastructure. When American units overrun a town, they don't just secure the territory. They look for telephone exchanges, radio installations, headquarters buildings. These are priority targets. Destroying them doesn't just disrupt
German operations. It creates information voids. German commanders stop receiving reports from subordinate units. They don't know if those units are destroyed, cut off, or simply out of communication. In the absence of information, they have to guess. And in warfare, guessing is fatal. The human cost of this command collapse is visible in small vignettes. A German major commanding a battalion that's lost contact with higher headquarters gathers his officers and tries to decide what to do. Should they retreat, hold position, try to find their division? Nobody knows where the division is. Nobody knows where the Americans are. The major makes his best judgment. They'll withdraw east and try to link up with other German units. The battalion moves out. 3 hours later, they're ambushed by American armor and forced to surrender. The major's decision was reasonable given his information, but his information was 12 hours out of date, and in 12 hours the entire tactical had changed. A German regimental headquarters establishes itself in a farmhouse 22 miles behind what they believe is the front line. They post minimal security, a few sentries, nothing more. The headquarters staff is working to reestablish contact with their battalions when American infantry surrounds the building. The first indication the German staff has of danger is when an American soldier kicks in the door. The regimental commander is captured while studying a map, trying to figure out where his units are. He never gets the answer. By midday on March 25th, German command has effectively lost situational awareness. Senior commanders know American forces are advancing, but they don't know where, how fast, or in what strength. The intelligence picture is fragmentary and contradictory. Every hour brings new reports of American forces appearing in unexpected locations, But those reports can't be integrated into a coherent understanding. The fog of war, always present in
combat, has become impenetrable. And in that fog, the German army is not fighting effectively. It's stumbling blindly, reacting to crises as they arise, unable to plan or coordinate because it can't see the battlefield clearly enough to make informed decisions. March 26th and 27th witnessed the complete breakdown of defensive coherence in central Germany. Units that were organized and functional 2 days ago are now scattered, leaderless, or surrendering. The cause is not overwhelming American firepower. It's the collapse of the operational architecture that allows armies to function. Without a rear area, without reliable communication, without clear understanding of where friendly and enemy forces are, the German army in this sector has stopped operating as an army. It's become a collection of isolated groups, each trying to survive independently. A Wehrmacht captain leads his company eastward, trying to retreat to what he hopes is a new defensive line. They move cautiously, avoiding main roads, using farm tracks and forest paths. At every crossroads, the captain has to decide which direction to go. He has no map reference for friendly positions, no radio contact with higher command, no intelligence on American location. He navigates by guesswork and hope. After 8 hours of movement, the company encounters another German unit, a battalion that's also retreating without orders. The two commanders compare notes and realize neither has any idea where they should go or what they should do. They decide to keep moving east and hope to find organized German forces. That hope is never fulfilled. Both units are surrounded and captured 2 days later. Supply systems are collapsing. Ammunition depots established in rear areas are being overrun before forward units can draw from them. Food supplies are captured or destroyed. Fuel dumps are lost. Units at the front are running low on everything they need to fight, not because supplies don't, but because the logistics network that moves supplies from rear to front has ceased to function. Truck convoys don't know what routes are safe. Supply officers don't know where their units are to deliver to them. The entire system depends on organization, communication, and a secure rear area. All three have disappeared. Medical evacuation breaks down. Wounded soldiers at forward aid stations cannot be evacuated because ambulances can't reach them safely. Field hospitals that would normally receive wounded are themselves being overrun or displaced. A German doctor at a dressing station watches American tanks pass within 100 yards of his position. He has 30 wounded men who need immediate surgery. He can't move them. He can't call for help. He can't even be certain that if he sends them to the rear, there's a functioning hospital to receive them. The American tanks don't attack the medical station. They're focused on deeper objectives. But their presence at the station is now in contested territory. The wounded can't be evacuated, and several who might have survived with proper treatment will die from lack of care. German soldiers are surrendering not after intense combat, but after days of confusion and isolation. A platoon, separated from its company during a chaotic withdrawal, spends 3 days trying to find friendly forces. They have no food, no ammunition resupply, no orders. They encounter American patrols twice and evade them. On the third day, exhausted and starving, they surrender to the first American unit they see. The platoon sergeant, a veteran of campaigns in Poland, France, and Russia, later says the confusion was worse than any combat he'd experienced. In combat, you know where the end is and you fight. In the chaos of March 1945, nobody knew where anyone was. Fighting seemed pointless. The psychological impact on German forces is devastating. Soldiers have been trained to operate within a structured environment, clear chains of command, defined front lines, secure rear areas. When that structure disintegrates, many soldiers simply lose the will to continue. They're not defeated, they're disoriented. The war has become incomprehensible. Orders don't arrive or arrive too late. Unit integrity has dissolved. The distinction between front and rear has vanished. In this environment, continuing to fight feels futile. Thousands surrender, not because American forces overwhelm them, but because the organizational framework that gave their resistance meaning has collapsed. By March 28th, Patton's Third Army has advanced over 80 miles in less than a week. But measuring the advance in miles misses the point. The real achievement is the destruction of German operational capability across an entire sector. German units still exist. Soldiers still have weapons. But they're not functioning as an army. They're fragmented, disconnected, and confused, unable to mount coordinated defense or effective counterattack. The front line, which began the week as a Defined position is now an abstract concept with no physical reality, and the rear area, which armies need to sustain operations, has ceased to exist entirely. The collapse of the rear area represents something more profound than tactical defeat. It marks the breakdown of the conceptual framework that makes organized warfare possible. Armies are not just collections of armed individuals. They're complex systems that require structure, coordination, and shared understanding of the battles. When that structure fails, when coordination becomes impossible, when shared understanding dissolves into confusion, the army stops functioning even if its component parts remain intact. German doctrine, like the doctrine of every modern army, assumes certain constants, that communications will function well enough to transmit orders, that logistics networks will move supplies from rear to front, that command hierarchy will allow coordination between units, that rear areas will provide sanctuary for support functions. These assumptions are not luxuries, they're necessities. Without them, the Army cannot operate as an integrated force. Individual soldiers can fight, small units can execute local actions, but division-level operations, corps-level maneuvers, Army-level coordination become impossible. Patton's operational method stripped away every one of those assumptions. Communications failed because American forces were cutting cables and overrunning radio stations. Logistics networks collapsed because supply routes passed through American-controlled territory. Command hierarchies broke down because headquarters were being captured faster than they could be reestablished. And rear areas disappeared because American spearheads were operating 30, 40, 50 miles beyond where German intelligence believed the front line was. The human experience of this collapse is captured in prisoner interrogations conducted in the weeks following. German officers, many of
them experienced professionals who had commanded in multiple campaigns, described the March 1945 fighting not as a series of battles, but as a descent into chaos. They use words like incomprehensible and surreal. They describe issuing orders they knew would never be received, making plans based on situations that had already changed, trying to coordinate forces that had already been destroyed or captured. One colonel states that by March 27th, he had ceased trying to understand the overall situation and was simply reacting to immediate crises, knowing that whatever he did would probably be irrelevant because the larger battle had moved beyond his control. The long-term impact extends beyond the immediate tactical situation. Once an army experiences this kind of systemic collapse, restoring it is extraordinarily difficult. It's not just a matter of replacing losses or repositioning units. It's rebuilding the entire organizational infrastructure. New communications networks must be
established. New supply routes must be created. New command relationships must be formed. New rear areas must be secured and organized. All of this takes time, resources, and most critically, a stable enough tactical situation to allow reconstruction. The German army in central Germany in late March 1945 has none of those things. American forces continue advancing. There's no stable line where reorganization can occur. There's no time to rebuild. There's no sanctuary where shattered units can reconstitute. The historical lesson is stark. In mobile warfare, speed is not just an advantage. It's a weapon that can destroy enemy capabilities without necessarily destroying enemy forces. Patton's advances in March 1945 inflicted relatively modest casualties in immediate combat, but they destroyed the German army's ability to fight as an organized force by collapsing the spatial and temporal structure that armies require. The front line disappeared. The rear area disappeared. The distinction
between safe and dangerous, between forward and back, between combat zone and support zone evaporated. And with that distinction gone, the German army in this sector ceased to be an army and became a collection of confused, isolated, demoralized groups waiting for the war to end. When military historians study the final campaigns in Europe, they often focus on battles won, cities captured, enemy forces destroyed. But the capture of Metz, the crossing of the Rhine, the seizure of bridges are symptoms, not causes. The cause is the collapse of German operational structure under the pressure of tempo they could not match. Patton didn't just advance faster than the Germans could retreat. He advanced faster than they could think, faster than they could communicate, faster than they could organize resistance. He moved so fast that the rear area, that essential sanctuary that every army needs, simply ceased to exist. And once that happened, once soldiers everywhere were in potential combat,
zones with no safe space, no clear orders, no coherent understanding of the battle, The war's structure itself began to collapse, not through dramatic destruction, but through the quiet disintegration of the organizational framework that makes armies more than armed mobs. The Germans didn't lose because they were defeated in battle. They lost because the battle became incomprehensible, and incomprehensible wars cannot be fought, only endured until they end.